A Walk in Amnesia by O. Henry. Part 2. Sometimes I went to quite expensive restaurants with soft music. Sometimes I went on the river in boats full of noisy young men and their girlfriends. And then there was Broadway with its theaters and bright lights. One afternoon I was going back into my hotel when a fat man came and stood in front of me. "Hello, Belford," he cried loudly. "What are you doing in New York? Is Mrs. B with you?" "I'm sorry, but you are making a mistake, sir," I said coldly. "My name is Pinkhammer. Please excuse me." The man moved away in surprise, and I walked over to the desk. Behind me, the man said something about a telephone. "Give me my bill," I said to the man behind the desk, "and bring down my suitcase in half an hour." That afternoon, I moved to a quiet little hotel on Fifth Avenue. One afternoon, in one of my favorite restaurants on Broadway, I was going to my table when somebody pulled my arm. "Mr. Belford!" a sweet voice cried. I turned quickly and saw a woman who was sitting alone. She was about 30 and she had very beautiful eyes. "How can you walk past me like that?" she said. "Didn't you know me?" I sat down at her table. Her hair was a beautiful red gold color. "Are you sure you know me?" I asked. "No," she smiled. "I never really knew you." "Well, my name is Edward Pinkhammer," I said, "and I'm from Kansas." "So you haven't brought Mrs. Belford with you, then?" she said, and she laughed. "You haven't changed much in 15 years, Elvin." Her wonderful eyes looked carefully at my face. "No," she said quickly, "you haven't forgotten. I told you that you could never forget." "I'm sorry," I answered, "but that's the trouble. I have forgotten everything." She laughed. "Did you know that I married 6 months after you did? It was in all the newspapers." She was silent for a minute. Then she looked up at me again. "Tell me one thing, Elvin," she said softly. "Since that night 15 years ago, can you touch, smell, or look at white roses and not think of me?" "I can only say that I don't remember any of this," I said carefully. "I'm very sorry." I tried to look away from her. She smiled and stood up to leave. Then she held out her hand to me, and I took it for a second. "Oh, yes, you remember," she said with a sweet and happy smile. "Goodbye, Elvin Belford." That night I went to the theater, and when I returned to my hotel, a quiet man in dark clothes was waiting for me. "Mr. Pinkhammer," he said, "can I speak with you for a minute? There is a room here." I followed him into a small room. A man and a woman were there. The woman was still beautiful, but her face was unhappy and tired. I liked everything about her. The man, who was about 40, came to meet me. "Belford," he said, "I'm happy to see you again. I told you that you were working too hard. Now you can come home with us. You'll soon be all right." "My name," I said, "is Edward Pinkhammer. I've never seen you before in my life." The woman cried out, "Oh, Elvin, Elvin, I am your wife." She put her arms around me, but I pushed them away. "Oh, Dr. Walney, what's the matter with him?" the woman cried. "Go to your room," the doctor said to her. "He'll soon be well again." The woman left, and so did the man in the dark clothes. The man who was a doctor turned to me and said quickly, "Listen, your name is not Edward Pinkhammer." "I know that," I replied, "but a man must have a name. Why not Pinkhammer?" "Your name," the doctor said, "is Elvin Belford. You are one of the best lawyers in Denver, and that woman is your wife." "She's a very fine woman," I said after a minute. "I love the color of her hair." She's a very good wife, the doctor replied. When you left 2 weeks ago, she was very unhappy. Then we had a telephone call from a man who saw you in a hotel here. I think I remember him, I said. He called me Belford. Excuse me, but who are you? I'm Bobby Volney. I've been your friend for 20 years and your doctor for 15 years. Elvin, try to remember. You say you are a doctor, I said. How can I get better? Does amnesia go slowly or suddenly? Sometimes slowly and sometimes suddenly. Will you help me, Dr. Volney? I asked. Old friend, he said, I'll do everything possible. Very well, and if you're my doctor, you can't tell anybody what I say? Of course not, Dr. Volney answered. I stood up. There were some white roses on the table. I went over to the table, picked up the roses, and threw them far out of the window. Then I sat down again. I think it will be the best, Bobby, I said, to get better suddenly. I'm a little tired of it all now. Go and bring my wife Marian in now. But, doctor, I said with a happy smile, oh, my good old friend, it was wonderful.